The 10 most famous pirate ships in history. Today, we embark on an epic journey, traversing the veil of time, to uncover the legends and secrets behind the 10 most famous pirate ships in history. Prepare to set sail on this adventure, where each wave brings us closer to unraveling the mysteries that have remained hidden in the depths of time. Number 10. The William. A vessel that evokes images of sails unfurled on distant horizons and treasures hidden on forgotten islands. It is intrinsically linked to the figure of the infamous Captain William Kidd. This ship was not only a witness but also a protagonist in some of the most daring adventures during the golden age of piracy. Captain Kidd, initially hired by British authorities as a pirate hunter, soon found himself entangled in the very world he had sworn to destroy. His name became synonymous with betrayal and deceit, but also with cunning and bravery. Kidd's most famous expedition aboard the William turned into one of the most controversial of his career. The capture of the Galley merchant, a ship laden with incalculable riches, was both his greatest triumph and his downfall. The Galley merchant, an Armenian-flagged vessel, was filled with treasures beyond imagination, fine silks, exotic spices, and above all, precious metals. Kidd, blinded by greed or perhaps justifying himself under the ambiguous morals of his time, justified the capture of the ship as a legitimate act against an enemy of his nation. However, the world did not see things the same way. The capture of the Galley merchant sparked an international scandal, leading Kidd to be marked as a pirate and traitor. The story of the William and Kidd is shrouded in myths and legends. Rumors suggest that the treasures of the Galley merchant were never fully recovered, and part of them were hidden by Kidd in remote locations, giving rise to countless stories of buried treasures that continue to fuel the imagination of treasure hunters and adventurers to this day. The end of the William and its captain was tragic. Kidd was captured, tried in London, and eventually executed in 1701. His death was a public spectacle designed to discourage piracy, but instead, it solidified his legend. The William, for its part, disappeared from historical records, but its story endures, a testament to the thin line between legend and reality, between heroes and villains, and between the infinite freedom of the seas and the inexorable reach of justice. Number 9. The Rising Sun. The Rising Sun was not just a name, it was a promise of power and danger on the horizon. Under the shadow of its sails, the Caribbean Sea became a chessboard where nations, merchants, and pirates played a deadly game of cunning, bravery, and brutality. This formidable pirate ship, commanded by figures now shrouded in mystery and legend, was the terror of the seas during the height of piracy in the 17th century. It was not just its imposing presence that instilled fear, but also the feats and, at times, atrocities of its captains, whose names were whispered with a mix of respect and fear in ports from Kingston to Cartagena. The captains of the Rising Sun were known not only for their nautical skill but for their cunning in combat. It was said that one of them, Captain Edward Shadow Black, was so skilled in nighttime navigation that he could slip the ship through the dark Caribbean waters almost unseen, appearing at dawn to surprise his victims. Under his command, the Rising Sun became a specter, appearing and disappearing with the sunrise. But it wasn't all shadows. Among its stories, there was also room for feats of bravery and humanity. It is told that on one occasion, after a fierce battle against a Spanish galleon, the crew of the Rising Sun rescued and cared for the wounded enemies instead of leaving them to their fate. These acts of compassion amidst the brutality of the sea were uncommon and wove a complex tapestry of respect and fear around the ship and its crew. Its armament was equally formidable. With 36 cannons and a crew that mastered both the art of navigation and naval combat, few dared to challenge its supremacy at sea. The stories tell how its cannons, nicknamed the Judges of the Sea, decided the fate of many, sealing the end of numerous ships that crossed its path. With each successful attack and every treasure captured, the legend of the Rising Sun grew. It was said that its hold hid riches of incalculable value, from Spanish gold to exotic jewels brought from the Far East. But beyond material riches, the real treasure of the Rising Sun was its story, a tale woven with the golden thread of adventure and the dark fabric of betrayal and the struggle for survival. Although the final fate of the rising sun is lost in the mists of time, its story remains alive, evoking the era when pirates and privateers were the true lords of the seven seas. The waves still whisper the stories of its battles, its triumphs and tragedies, and in every whisper, the rising sun sails once again, eternal and indomitable in the vast ocean of our imagination. Number 8. The Satisfaction. The Satisfaction, a name that resonated with authority and fear across the blue waters of the Caribbean, was more than just a ship. It was the emblem of a man, Henry Morgan, whose fame and fortune were forged in the furnace of audacity and cunning. Morgan, a Welshman who transformed from an aspirant to a legend, was not an ordinary pirate. He was a privateer, with letters of marque granted by the English crown, which in theory made his acts of plunder and pillage a form of private war against the enemies of England, mainly Spain. Among his feats, the raid on Portobello, one of the most formidable strongholds of the Spanish Empire in the New World, stands out as a feat of daring. With just a few hundred men, Morgan subdued the city, using both his combat prowess and his cunning in the psychology of fear. It is said that he used priests and nuns as human shields, showing a darker and more ruthless side of his character. Another of his legendary feats was the capture of Panama in 1671. This action was not only notable for the wealth that was plundered but also for the cunning and tenacity that Morgan and his men showed in crossing the dense jungle of the isthmus. However, this victory had a bitter aftertaste. The city was set ablaze, and to this day, debates persist about whether the fire was a deliberate act by Morgan and his men or a tragic accident. Morgan's life was full of contradictions. Despite his acts of cruelty and his greed, he was a charismatic leader and respected by his men. His ability to navigate not only the seas but also the turbulent waters of politics earned him the appointment as Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. In this position, surprisingly, he became a fierce pursuer of pirates, protecting the wealth he had helped accumulate in the colony. The legacy of Henry Morgan and his satisfaction is complex. On one hand, they embody the thirst for adventure, cunning, and courage. On the other, the violence and cruelty that accompanied their achievements cannot be denied. Today, the stories and legends left by Morgan and his satisfaction continue to captivate, reminding us of an era when the Caribbean was a stage for vast riches, fierce conflicts, and personalities larger than life itself. Number 7. The Jolly Roger. The Jolly Roger is not just a ship, it's a living legend in the annals of pirate history. Under the shadow of its iconic flag, the Skull and Crossbones, designed by Captain Calico Jack, this ship has sailed the seas, sowing both admiration and fear in the hearts of those who crossed its path. Calico Jack, whose real name was John Rackham, earned his nickname due to his preference for flashy calico clothes. But beyond his peculiar taste in fashion, Rackham was a notorious figure for his deeds and indomitable spirit. His audacity led him to commit acts that, while often atrocious, also demonstrated exceptional cunning and bravery. It is said that he even challenged and dethroned the famous Captain Charles Vane, taking his place as captain of the Jolly Roger. However, one of the most fascinating stories of the Jolly Roger is that of its most unusual crew members, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. These two women defied all the stereotypes and expectations of their time. Anne Bonny, originally Rackham's companion, was known for her ferocity and her ability to fight shoulder to shoulder with any sailor. Mary Read, disguised as a man, joined the crew and only revealed her true identity after forming an unbreakable bond with Anne. The presence of these two women on the Jolly Roger was not only a challenge to the social norms of the time but also added a layer of intrigue and mystery to the already legendary ship. The stories of Anne and Mary, often intertwined with those of Calico Jack, became legends, speaking of their bravery, wit, and sometimes, their cruelty. But like every great story, that of the Jolly Roger and its notorious crew also has its end. In 1720, in a dramatic confrontation, the ship was captured and Calico Jack, along with several crew members, were executed. Anne Bonny and Mary Read escaped the gallows due to their pregnancy, although their ultimate fate is shrouded in mystery. Number 6. Adventure Galley. The Adventure Galley, with its imposing presence and robust construction, was the stage for a dramatic twist in the career of its most infamous captain, William Kidd, also known as Captain Kidd. This ship, whose mere mention evoked both admiration and fear, was built in 1695 and was notable for its 34 cannons and unusually high speed, features that made it a formidable threat on the 17th century seas. The story of Kidd and the Adventure Galley is a complex mix of loyalty and betrayal, law and criminality. Originally hired by the British government, Kidd was tasked with pursuing and capturing pirates, thus protecting trade routes from disruption and looting. However, fate had a different course reserved for him and his loyal crew. During their odyssey, the lines between the hunter and the hunted began to blur, and Kidd, who was once a respected pirate hunter, found himself transformed into what he vowed to destroy. One of the most notorious exploits associated with the Adventure Galley took place in the waters of the Indian Ocean. Kidd captured an Armenian merchant ship, the Quedagh Merchant, laden with valuable treasures. This act marked the point of no return for Kidd. It was an act that solidified him in history as a pirate rather than a pirate hunter. Despite Kidd's insistence that the ship was flying a French flag and was therefore a legitimate target under his commission, his sponsors disagreed. Kidd's transition into piracy resulted in an implacable hunt by the authorities. Eventually, betrayed and captured, Kidd was taken back to England, where he faced a notoriously biased trial. In 1701, he was executed, leaving behind a legacy tinged with both notoriety and mystery. It is said that Kidd buried treasures in various places, stories that have fueled countless treasure hunts and speculations to this day. Meanwhile, the fate of the Adventure Galley was equally grim. Damaged and in poor condition after years at sea and encounters with other ships, the vessel was abandoned and eventually burned, its remains submerged and forgotten, until, centuries later, efforts to locate and study its remains began to shed light on this dark but captivating chapter of maritime history. Number 5. The Fancy. Under the command of Henry Every, became an icon not only for its impressive speed and design but also for the bold exploits of its captain and crew. Every, nicknamed the Pirate King, was one of the most infamous and skillful pirates of his time, managing to escape time and again from the authorities and other pirates seeking his fortune. Every's most celebrated feat was the capture of the treasure ship of the Great Mughal, known as the Ganj-i-Sawai. This stroke was not only bold in its execution but also had profound repercussions. The wealth obtained in this assault was immense, and it is estimated that the loot could have contained up to 600,000 pounds in precious metals and jewels, a fortune that today would be equivalent to over $400 million. The capture of this treasure not only enriched Every and his crew but also ignited the world's imagination, fueling countless legends and accounts. However, this act was not without violence and cruelty. Reports of the time detail horrors inflicted on the crew and passengers of the Ganj-i-Sawai, including torture and atrocities that tarnished Every's reputation, despite his cunning and success. These brutal acts prompted one of the first international manhunts, with the East India Company and the Mughal Emperor himself pressuring the British government for his capture. Despite the infamy of his greatest victory, and being the target of a relentless search, Henry Every managed to evade capture. His ability to disappear with his fortune gave rise to speculation and legends. Rumors suggested he had assumed a new identity and lived out his days in opulence. Other accounts suggested he had been betrayed and lived in poverty. The true fate of Henry Every and the treasures of the Fancy remain shrouded in mystery, fueling the legend of the pirate and his iconic ship. Number 4. The Royal Fortune. The Royal Fortune was more than just a ship. It was a series of powerful vessels that embodied fear and audacity on the high seas during the golden age of piracy. Under the shadow of its name, each Royal Fortune was a witness and protagonist of countless stories, marked by the cunning and brutality of their captains. Bartholomew "Black Bart" Roberts, whose name is almost synonymous with piracy, was the mastermind behind these floating legends. Black Bart was a pirate of contrasts and contradictions. Born in 1682 in Wales, he began his life at sea not as a pirate, but as a third mate on a slave ship. His entry into the world of piracy was not voluntary. He was captured and forced to join the crew of the pirate Howell Davis. However, Roberts adapted to this life surprisingly quickly, and after Davis's death, he was chosen captain by his own crew, a true testament to his charisma and maritime skill. As a captain, Roberts was an exceptional strategist and navigator. His success was not solely due to brute force but to his meticulous planning and knowledge of the sea. It is said he captured over 400 ships, a feat that places him among the most successful pirates of all time. His tactics were varied and cunning, from using false flags to approach unsuspecting prey to executing complex nautical maneuvers to escape navies that pursued him. Each royal fortune was a reflection of Roberts' audacity. These ships were not just instruments of war and plunder but also symbols of the unbridled freedom sought by pirates. It is told that the ships were well maintained and incredibly fast, allowing them to chase prey or flee when necessary. However, the life of a pirate like Roberts was not without brutality and violence. Piracy, at its core, was an act of rebellion against power structures but also a dangerous and bloody path. Battles at sea were often fierce, and although Roberts preferred to avoid unnecessary violence, he did not hesitate to resort to it when needed. It is said he had a strict code on his ships, and betrayal or breaking his rules were met with severe punishments. The feats of Roberts and his royal fortune are surrounded by stories and legends. One of the most notable is the capture of the Portuguese ship, the Sagrada Familia, laden with incalculable riches. Another tale speaks of how Roberts sailed through an entire fleet of merchant ships while raising his famous black flag, spreading panic but not firing a single shot. Roberts's career came to an end in 1722 when he was killed in a fierce encounter with the HMS Swallow. His death marked the end of an era, but the legend of the royal fortune and Black Bart Roberts live on, reminding us of a time when the sea was the stage for stories of freedom, adventure, and sometimes ruthless ambition. Number 3. Whydah Galley. The Whydah Galley, originally built as a ship for the British East India Company in 1715, quickly emerged in maritime history as a legend shrouded in shadow and intrigue. Its capture by the famous pirate Black Sam Bellamy not only marked the beginning of its golden age under the Black Flag but also catapulted it to the center of numerous stories and legends that endure to this day. Samuel Bellamy, known as Black Sam, for his refusal to wear the powdered wig that was fashionable among men of his time and his preference for tying his long black hair with a ribbon, was a character of contradictions. Although his career as a pirate was notoriously short, lasting only a year, Bellamy managed to earn a reputation as a Robin Hood of the seas, supposedly declaring that he robbed from the rich to give to the poor. Despite this idealism, it can't be denied that he committed acts of cruelty and violence, common in the piracy of his time. Under Bellamy's command, the Whydah witnessed countless battles and boardings. The ship, originally designed to transport slaves and goods between Africa, the Caribbean, and Europe, was adapted by Bellamy to serve his piratical purposes. It is said to have been one of the fastest and best-armed ships of its time, with an arsenal of over 28 cannons and capacity for a crew of more than 150 men. The legend of Bellamy and the Whydah reached its tragic climax in April 1717, when a fierce storm sank the ship off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The wealth accumulated in the Whydah was immense. It was rumored to contain vast amounts of gold, silver, and other treasures plundered from over 50 ships. However, that fortune sank with the ship, and Bellamy found his grave in the depths of the ocean. The mystery of the Whydah and its lost treasure endured for centuries until, in 1984, underwater explorer Barry Clifford discovered the remains of the ship. This find not only confirmed the real existence of the Whydah but also allowed the recovery of a significant portion of its treasure, along with artifacts that offer an invaluable insight into life during that tumultuous era. The recovery of the Whydah was a milestone in underwater archaeology and made the ship the first and only pirate ship whose treasure has been authenticated and recovered. Number 2. The Golden Hind. The Golden Hind, captained by Sir Francis Drake, not only immortalized itself in the annals of history for completing the second circumnavigation of the world between 1577 and 1580, but also left a trail of stories, legends, and controversies that still resonate in the collective memory. Sir Francis Drake, under the sponsorship of Queen Elizabeth I of England, set out with a fleet of 5 ships in December 1577. However, the Golden Hind, originally called Pelican, was the only one that survived the entire journey. Though officially the mission was exploratory, it was in reality a privateering expedition, and the Golden Hind became a thorn in the side of the Spanish Empire, England's arch-enemy at the time. During this epic journey, Drake and his crew conducted numerous daring raids and looting. One of the most notorious was the raid on Nombre de Dios in Panama, where Drake and his men are said to have seized enormous quantities of silver and gold. However, the most significant feat was probably the capture of the Spanish galleon Cacafuego, from which Drake took treasures so vast that, it is said, the Golden Hind was so overloaded with silver, gold, and precious stones that it could barely navigate. However, Drake's actions were not viewed the same by everyone. To the Spaniards, he was a ruthless pirate and an enemy of the state. To the English, especially Queen Elizabeth I, he was a national hero, a brave privateer who filled the kingdom's coffers and defended England's interests against its rivals. Queen Elizabeth even knighted Drake with the title Sir aboard the Golden Hind and is said to have shared a banquet on the ship. Number 1. Queen Anne's Revenge. Queen Anne's Revenge, a name that evokes majesty and power, is a fascinating emblem of the golden age of piracy. This vessel, initially a French merchant ship known as La Concorde, was captured and transformed by the infamous Blackbeard, Edward Teach, who turned it into the epicenter of his reign of terror on the seas. Before falling into the hands of Blackbeard, La Concorde had its own story as a slave ship, transporting hundreds of slaves from the coast of Africa to the New World colonies. Its capture and transformation into Queen Anne's Revenge in 1717 was a twist of fate that would change its course in history. Blackbeard, a captain whose name and imposing appearance instilled fear in the hearts of his enemies, equipped the ship with approximately 40 cannons, turning it into a floating fortress capable of facing the largest and best-armed vessels of its time. His reputation was bolstered with each confrontation and looting, and the silhouette of Queen Anne's Revenge on the horizon was enough to make even the bravest captains consider surrendering without a fight. The story of Queen Anne's Revenge is not just sprinkled with battles and looting but also with legends and myths. It is said that Blackbeard practiced witchcraft and performed strange rituals on the deck of his ship, perhaps to instill even more fear in those who dared to challenge him. Although these stories may be exaggerations, they contribute to the mystique and dark aura surrounding the ship and its captain. Blackbeard's reign came to an abrupt end in 1718 when he was ambushed and killed by British naval forces in a fierce battle near Ocracoke Island, North Carolina. Queen Anne's Revenge, severely damaged in the battle, was abandoned, and its location remained a mystery for centuries. It wasn't until 1996 that the remains believed to be Queen Anne's Revenge were discovered near Beaufort, North Carolina. Archaeologists and historians have recovered thousands of artifacts from the site, including weaponry, coins, and personal utensils, providing an invaluable window into the past and offering a glimpse into the life on one of the most legendary pirate ships in history.